A part of positive discipline, a part of Adler, a part of understanding the need for belonging and significance and respect is understanding that neurodivergent children need to feel like they belong and are significant in your household, yes, but also in their school.
My guest is Natasha Nelson, a friend and a colleague, and she offers parenting seminars. And I am excited to have her on our show today because we as educators, parents, want our children to do really well in school. And sometimes their needs are different than other students in a classroom. And Natasha is going to be able to shed some light on how we can support our child as a parent, and for school leaders, how we can work with children when they have different needs or they have different ways of learning. You're listening to Now What podcast with Yogi Patel. My guest is Natasha Nelson. Natasha, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into how we can help our young ones.
Absolutely. So hello, you handsome and gorgeous lot. My name is Natasha Nelson. I am the founder and CEO of Supernova Parenting, which is a nonprofit that really emphasizes supporting and helping caregivers of children who are neurodivergent or have an intellectual developmental disability with support, education, and resources as they go through their journey of parenting. I kind of bring things from different faucets. So I pull a little bit from positive discipline. I pull a little bit from my extensive education on neurodivergence and intellectual developmental disabilities. I pull a little bit from the National Mental Health Alliance that I'm also certified in to give some of that mental health support. And then I pull from HOPE, which is healthy outcomes from positive experiences, because a lot of the families that I help and support that are families of color dealing with disability have a lot of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or adverse community experiences and systemic issues that they're dealing with. And so giving them a sense of hope by helping them to have a foundation of how they can still have positive outcomes despite having those adverse experiences in their life. I have 2 children. We are all neurodivergent in this house. I myself identify as autistic, and I have ADHD and a lot of other acronyms. And then my children have autism and ADHD as well. And my husband has ADHD. And then I am also a veteran. I was in the Army for 7 years.
Natasha, could these symptoms or could this neurodivergent situations for young persons or adults, are they similar or different from those who have experienced traumatic situations in their childhood or in their adulthood?
They are not. That's actually part of the problem that I see that happens when we're talking about the fact that children of color and young girls are misdiagnosed or just not diagnosed at all as children. And a lot of that is because the way trauma shows up in small children, especially of different cultures and different genders and different things, instead of all the research that we've done, which is usually on white, cis, young males, when it shows up differently in those people, it looks a lot like what we see in textbook, what's the responses or reactions to trauma. So you're having cognitive difficulties, you're having difficulty identifying and regulating your emotions. You're having difficulty in memory and even just remembering what someone just said to you. You're having difficulty with hyperarousal, so fight or flight all the time, but also hypoarousal, where you disassociate or you just get frozen in fear. So a lot of the signs that we know of as signs that a child might have autism or ADHD or OCD or bipolar disorder can look very similar to the signs that you would see from a child who's been through a traumatic experience, such as poverty, such as abuse, such as a parent who has a substance abuse issue, what we're seeing is that the signs that we see in children who are neurodivergent, so we're talking about executive function and executive dysfunction issues. We're talking about emotional identification and regulation. We're talking about sensory issues. We're talking about communication issues, because a lot of times a child who has dealt with some trauma in their lives can actually have trouble communicating or just be selectively mute. And that we see those same issues with children who have neurodivergence. We're talking about perception issues. So how you perceive the world around you can change when you've dealt with a lot of trauma in your childhood. And then we're also talking about something as simple as motor skills and activities of daily living and how you go about those things. And there are very much parallels between children who have maybe autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, or OCD, and children who've dealt with trauma in their childhood and how they go about those things. In fact, I kind of am a test book for that, because when I was getting diagnosed as an adult. And part of the reason of why my diagnosis took so long, it took 2 years to fully diagnose me, is because the psychologist was very serious about the fact that he wanted to make sure that I had autism and PTSD, not that I was just having PTSD and attributing some of the challenges and issues I was having with PTSD to maybe having autism because my daughters had autism. So he had to go into and talk to my family members. He even got me to pull up an old teacher from when I was in high school. He wanted to actually get information and questionnaires and surveys to people who knew me when I was a child before a lot of my trauma, a lot of my military service and different things, to actually see if there were signs of sensory issues and emotional regulation and social issues prior to the trauma. So because to him at first, he was like, this could just be a very serious case of what they call complex PTSD from having long amounts of your life in trauma.
Obviously, after your children are born, now you kind of say, hey, what about me? And you go through this process. So those who are listening, what is the first step they can do to find out if they have autism or they have PTSD or whatever that might be going on, because they feel challenged through life and they know that there's something that they need to help them in terms of tools?
Absolutely. So for me, it was a challenge. I couldn't find that balance, and I didn't know why I couldn't find that balance. I was like, there's supposed to be a balance. I see it on TV. The parent has a balance of being able to take care of the child and being a woman and a person and a human. And I couldn't find that. I just seemed to only focus on my children, and that was frustrating for me. But what's also happened is, as they were getting diagnosed, I started studying and learning what autism is and what ADHD is and what neurodivergence is. And every time I learned something new, I had a story from my childhood that correlated directly to it. And so if you feel yourself starting to be like, oh, I have sensory issues. I've had issues with loud sounds and bright lights and people touching me without my consent my whole life. If you start feeling like, I never feel like it's easy to talk to people. It's easy to make friends. I always feel like I have to audition and role play and get myself excited to go to social events. And if you start feeling those things, the first thing you want to do is talk to your primary care provider, because we live in the world we live in. And usually you have to have a referral from your primary care provider in order for you to get the evaluations and things that you need paid for by your insurance. So that's always going to be your first step. However, if your situation is anything like mine, I know a large part of Yogi's audience is in California, and you all have a little better system than I have. I'm here in Georgia. And when I went to my primary care provider, she said, I hear you. This all makes sense to me. I'm happy to write you a referral, but you have to tell me where, because I don't know where to refer you to. I don't know who diagnoses adults with things like this. And that was fair, because after I did my research, which my research was literally going to my daughter's autism clinics and asking them, and then asking them. And eventually I went to Emory University. I started going to the colleges that study autism here, and they were able to give me a list. And it was only 5 providers in Georgia that actually are licensed and authorized to diagnose adults with neurodivergence. So autism, ADHD, OCD, all of those different things. So I got the list and then took that to my provider. And then she had me then call all of those places and find out which one takes my insurance. Because again, you want these things to be paid for. So I had to call each one, tell them what insurance I had and see if they had it. And out of those 5, 1 took my insurance.
Okay.
So I had to make an appointment. So that is to say, I'm always very honest about this. It is a tough process. It is a long process. If you do not want to do all that bureaucracy, it's between $2,000 and $5,000 to just pay out of pocket for it to be done. And if you do want to go through your insurance, you're probably still going to have co-pays and a deductible. And so you'll probably end up, when it's all said and done, paying about $2,000, which is what I did. But that was for the diagnosis and then also for a year of treatment. Ended up costing me around $2,000. So it is expensive. I think it was a blessing for me. I think it was worthy. I think it has helped me so much in understanding myself, my family. If you have grown up the way I have, to where you've had these difficulties and you didn't know why, it answers questions for you and makes you just feel like you're not crazy. Because I really thought I was an alien when I was a kid, and I didn't know why I felt that way, but I always felt different everywhere. And so that was very validating for me to know I do experience the world differently, and that's okay.
At your age, probably going through severe challenges because you said you were noticing you were different. And to come to a place where you're like, yeah, this is what it is, and I am okay. Because we're all unique in different ways, but we like to have this one way. We like to see people the way we are, right? To identify with them. And when you don't see people who are like us, we're looking for them. So now let's go back to, what is autism? Because you said you had to look all of this up. And how is it separate from ADHD and other ways that maybe you show up?
I always like to go through the terms that everyone loves to use, right? So everyone likes to use neurodivergence now. That's the new big word, neurodiverse and neurodivergence, right? So basically, neurodivergence means that you have some type of neurological disorder. Your brain is what we like to call wired differently than the typical person. And so that can look like ADHD, that can look like bipolar disorder, that can look like autism, that can look like any neurodivergence, neurological difference in your brain. However, when people say on the spectrum, they're talking specifically about autism, which is autism spectrum disorder. Now, there was a time when you either had autism or you could have Asperger's, you can have, and all of that has now been combined into autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And there are different levels. I believe there's 5 categorically in the DSM-5. It's not just on your communication and your social norms, the way you follow social norms, the way you make connections. It also has to do with your ability to function in society. So activities of daily living. Are you stimming? Are you having sensory issues to where you can't actually function and do things that you need to do in your life? Now, why is all of that important? Well, because they do a system for each. So those numbers I gave you, those 5 levels, they do it for each. So, for example, one of my daughters is 3-2, meaning that for social norms, for communication, they said that her level was a 2, which is meaning that she's a little bit more high, what some people like to call high functioning, and what I like to call has less support needs in that particular field. But then in sensory and stimming and being able to function and do activities, they categorized her as a 3, meaning she would need more support in that particular area. So, and then my other daughter, Paris, who's minimum speaking, as I like to call it, she's 3-3. She's a 3 in both of those fields. And my psychologist, he actually made me laugh. He said, technically, we have to diagnose you for what you are now. He says, I don't know what we would have diagnosed you if you were a child, but as of right now, you are a 1-2. So for the category of stimming, of sensory needs, of being able to do activities of daily living, I am a 2. but for the things of like needing understanding social norms, being able to build relationships, being able to understand other people's feelings, I am more of a 2. So the autism affects our sensory. So what we input into our bodies is our sensory, your sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. But also you have internal senses that help dictate how you experience the world. And there are 3. There is your interoception center, which is basically what tells you, hey, I'm thirsty. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I have to use the restroom. So, hey, it's hot in here. Is anyone else hot? That's that internal system that's telling you what's happening with your body. And then you have your vestibular sense, which is your sense of movement from your body in relation to gravity on this planet. So you know how there's some people who love to be on a boat, and then there's some people who can get seasick. And then there's people who love to drive their car fast, and then there's me who always has their hands on the 10 and the 2 and very much follows the rules and the speed limit. And then you have people who love roller coasters, and you have people like me who can't even sit in a swing without feeling like they're dizzy or about to be nauseous. And so that has to do with your movements and how you experience movement in the world. It's called your vestibular sense. And then the last internal sense that you have is your proprioception sense. And when you think of this sense in the fact of your body, but movement. So what I mean by that is how you move. You can move your right hand in one way and move your left hand another way at the same time. So it's basically you internally sensing all of your body in relation to your body, right? And so why is that important? All of that together is how you experience the world, the input you're going to get from the world, and then what's also affected by autism is our perception. So we get that input, and then how we perceive that input may be different because of autism and rewiring. So we got sensory, we got perception, which moves us into motor skills. Because if your proprioception sense is not wired as a typical person's, you may be overdoing things or underdoing things. You may be clumsy. You may walk on your toes instead of walking how other people walk. You may like to jump and spring and move. And so sometimes your motor skills, even things as simple as taking the toothpaste, opening the toothpaste and putting it on your toothbrush, may be difficult for you. So we have sensory, perception, motor skills. The next thing is going to be executive function. So think of executive function like the traffic controller of your brain. Okay. So it's 3 main things that executive function are over. So the first thing is your working memory. The next one is going to be your mental flexibility. So your ability to adapt to change. And then the third one is, my brain went blank again. That's autism coming in. Mental flexibility. Has to do with time management and organization. There we go. So your working memory, your mental flexibility, and then your actual time management, right? All of that is connected to your executive function. So anything from being able to be organized, to prioritize things, being on time, knowing how long it takes you to actually do an activity, not getting distracted, being able to stay focused, but being able to be flexible. So if you're focused and something happens and you need to close down and move on and transition to something else, being able to do that, right? All of those things are connected to your executive function. And those of us who are autistic struggle with that. However, people with ADHD, that's the majority of their disorder. They struggle with that a lot. And sometimes you'll have people who have autism and ADHD. Sometimes you'll have someone who just has autism, but maybe they struggle with rigidity, which is that difficulty with having that mental flexibility and being able to adapt to change. No, I like my routine the way I like my routine. I want this to go like this and like this. And if that doesn't go like that, I'm going to react instead of respond. And I might get some fight, flight, freeze, or fun. That's what's going on. So we have sensory, perception, motor skills, executive function, and the last one is communication. And when we're saying communication, we're not just talking about verbal speech. We're talking also about nonverbal communication. We call it alternative or augmentative communication. We're talking about things like social norms and being able to understand why a group of people expect to talk about things they don't care about when they first meet each other instead of talking about intense, passionate information. So like just those simple social norms that society does that sometimes do not make sense to an autistic person because our wires get crossed. So we don't understand why I would tell a white lie to save your feelings, because wouldn't it be better to just tell you the truth in a kind and firm way so that you're not embarrassed later than to spare your feelings now and you be embarrassed later? So those little nuances sometimes we struggle with. Social norms, communication, perception, sensory, executive function, and motor skills. All of those are affected. And we wish the world could be very easy and that those will all be affected in the same way, but they're not. It's a spectrum, meaning when we say spectrum, we mean on each of those things. And you could meet one autistic person and they could have more support needs or less support needs in each of those things. So I have 3 autistic people in this house and we all show up very differently on that spectrum.
Natasha, I appreciate all the beautiful ways that you explained it. And I definitely will use the term neurodivergent versus years ago, we used to just say autism or ADHD, but it all falls under neurodivergence. So thank you for that. And your humor. It sounds like you use humor and communication to share with others exactly what's going on for you. And I want us to go into, because one of the things as school leader, you and I have talked about is first day of school. Students are coming in and the teachers having a classroom full of students with variety of needs. And I want to learn from you on how did you prepare your children for school, and how we, the teachers, have some skills, but we really don't know what to do at the end of the day with children with variety of needs, especially when they're neurodivergent.
So the first thing that I did was grab books from the library, from my resources of books that I already had that actually talk about the first day of school for any child, and then also specifically for an autistic child who may feel different, who may have different things going. And we read those books and then we talked about them. Of course, we're going to talk about them at a kindergarten and minimum speaking first grade autistic child's level, but we still talk about them. It may be questions like, are you excited to go to school, Paris, or are you scared? Oh, no. And she'll say, excited. And I say, oh, you're excited? Are you excited to do math? Or are you excited to read? And then she's gonna always go to read. I call it limited choices because she's minimum speaking. I don't do a lot of open-ended questions because we're just gonna look at each other and blink until someone speaks. So a lot of literature, even videos. Some parents do something called social stories where you actually get pictures of your child doing different activities, preparing for school, and then you do a picture book that shows them, hey, this is what the first day of school is like. You're going to meet your teacher. You're going to have a desk. You're going to have a cubby. You're going to play with friends. You're going to learn, and you show them pictures basically, but you're basically getting your child ready with some type of visual for what school is going to look like, because it's going to look very different than your household. And after that, I was blessed. My district does something called Meet the Teacher. And so we get a message saying, hey, some schools call it open house. So it's basically open house. You either Meet the Teacher open house is where your school will have somewhere like the gymnasium and they'll invite, the PTA, and they'll have the transportation office there. They'll have the school lunch cafeteria, whatever that situation is there. And so you'll be in that. And then after you go through all those things you need to do to register your child, to prepare your child for school, you're able to go and meet the teacher. And that was really important to me because we call it a reconnaissance. I am a veteran, but I do reconnaissance for anything. If my child has a new therapy session that she's going to go to, I drive to that therapy session before so I can prepare myself for the drive and what that's going to look like. And then I also take my daughter there to meet the therapist, to walk around, so that first day, we're not anxiety and hives trying to make sure that we're going to the right therapist, we're going to the right room, we're going to those things. And so I do that for my children. They come to meet the teacher. We walk with them and show them the way to their teacher's classroom. We make sure they meet their teachers, any aides or anything like that. And I think that's really important to do, whether that be called open house or meet the teacher, making sure if your child has any type of disability or any type of neurodivergence, that they have that, because a big part of all of this for us is anxiety. Anxiety is the thing, because it's a big change. I talked about executive function having to do with mental flexibility. A lot of what happens for autistic people and what we get called is very rigid, because we like our routines. We like our day to go like yesterday when. We like for things to be the way they are. And so that's a new school. It's a new teacher. It's a new classroom. It's new friends. You want to do as much as possible to transition them in a way that's comfortable and with the least amount of anxiety. And so once we meet that teacher, I want to immediately make sure that teacher understands that they're a part of our village. This isn't a us versus you, or I'm not going to be the parent that you don't hear from until the end of the school year. Something's wrong. I'm probably going to get hurts right from the get-go. We are friends now, teacher. But I always ask them how they want to get to know my child. And I think that's very important, because every teacher has a different way of going about that. And you should respect that teacher's process. They've had training and years of work in classrooms, and they know every teacher's going to be different because they're human, and their school is going to be different. And so they're doing what they know works best for them to adapt to their environment. So I asked, do you want me to give you the full rundown of my child right now? Or do you want a few weeks to get to know how she reacts in your classroom and get to know her in your classroom? That's also important, because parents, I do want to reiterate to you, you know your home baby. You do not know your school baby. Kids act very different in the classroom. Sometimes a teacher doesn't want to hear, I hate to say it, your labels and your bias and your backstory on your child and what they're doing at home, because they might be a completely different kid in her classroom or his classroom. And so some teachers, they like to have 2 weeks to get to know your child on their own. And I respect that process. But if a teacher is different and they say, no, I would like to hear everything you have, parent, especially if they're a teacher who's never dealt with a child who has special support needs. So they're like, give me everything. Give them everything. I do a little write-up that's like, hi, I'm Riley, and I like to do these things and these things. I really do not like these things and these things. I have challenges with these things, and I have some amazing gifts and assets, and they're these. I give her a top card, basically, for my daughter there. And then I also include their diagnosis. I include their IEP. I have all of those things ready to share with the teacher. And then I make sure that teacher knows that, like I said, we're best friends. Here's my number. You never have to worry about me being upset about you contacting me. You never have to worry about me being upset about, you having a concern and coming to me. I'm not going to think that you're a liar. We are a team. I want to make sure that the teacher knows that and that they have communication with me. Now, this is interesting because I have the privilege. I try to always, like you said, humor. So I always try to make it in a positive light, accentuate the positive of having 2 autistic children who are in very different first day classrooms. So I have my Paris, who is my oldest and my minimum speaking autistic child. And so she has always been, and probably will always be, in a classroom specifically for autistic children. Not only because she is minimum speaking, but because her support needs and her academic cognition are a completely different level. She's 6 actually, but she is reading full novels. She is doing math. She is building puzzles. She is building elaborate domino sets and knocking them down and learning physics. But then she also can't sit still in a chair, and she really struggles to not make a mess when she's eating food, and she struggles to have patience and wait in line, and she struggles to control her emotions and not hit when she's upset. So her behavioral support is at a completely different level than her academic and cognitive support. And so she will probably always be in a school that is specialized for autistic children. And so with that, I don't have to give the whole spiel on, what autism is and have you ever experienced autism and, and those things. Usually the teacher has a classroom full of children on all different, not all different ends of the spectrum, because it's specialized to children who are minimum speaking, who actually have their own level or on a specific level academically, but they have the same support needs. So maybe they're all minimum speaking. They're all struggling to sit still. They're all struggling to deal with their emotions and have that social emotional support. For that, it's just letting that teacher know I'm there for her, asking her what other extra supplies she needs, learning their system, being supportive of the system, and making sure I have open communication. But my youngest daughter, Riley, her autism shows up like me. So if you haven't been able to tell, I'm a vivacious speaker, orator of the year. I've always been the orator. Since I was a kid, I was talking. My first word was a sentence, as was hers. It was when I told my psychologist that's when he was like, oh yeah, so you probably did have autism. Because that's actually a sign. It's called being hyperlexic. So teaching yourself to read, first word being a sentence, struggling with pronouns, different things like that. So yeah, so that was me. And that's my youngest daughter. And so she is put in a general education class, but she gets a few hours out of the week of social and emotional support and sensory support, because those are her main challenges. It's her struggling with boundaries from other people and other children, and for her really struggling with her sensory, because she's mainly a sensory avoider. So if children come up and touch her without warning her, it's like they beat her up and, and they're malicious and they're trying to get her. What happened on the first day of Meet the Teacher, we went to meet this teacher, and it's a general education public school. But she would still get support. She gets pulled out with the SPED teacher and a SPED aide for specific subjects. And some of those are specific to social and emotional, but others are ones that they know that she struggles with, and they want to give her that support for that specific subject. So for example, she really struggles with math, but not in the sense of, for some reason, she loves addition, gets addition, got it. Anytime you try to do subtraction, she's like, why would you take it away?
It makes sense.
And she gets really upset about it. So right now they have her with support for math. And so when I got to the Meet the Teacher told me right off the bat that she knew of. She had never had an autistic child in her class. She also made that comment that we as parents of children with autism hate and cringe on, which was, well, she doesn't look like she has autism. If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known. And I always kind of cringe up. And because it was Riley's teacher, I didn't do what I normally do. What I normally do is I like to slap people in the face with the fact that I'm autistic. So when they say she doesn't look autistic, I say, well, how do I look? Because I have autism. I love doing that because people's face is so funny. So, but this is Riley's teacher. I want to build that community. So I didn't do that. I just said, okay, well, of course she's in your class. So they thought she was ready for a general education class, but she does need a bit more social and emotional support and sensory support. And for most of the things in your classroom, I am happy to supply the sensory support because I know what she needs. However, for the social and emotional support, what I normally do is have like a common corner. And she got excited. She said, oh, yes, this is the first year that was put in our curriculum. So I don't really know what it's about, but I have this corner over here and I have this basket. And I went to her common corner and I was like, oh no, the walls were bare. It was literally a corner and there was a little basket and it had like a keychain, pop-it fidget and some more, crayons and some little coloring books. And that was it. That was all that was in the bucket. And like, there weren't any posters identifying emotions. There weren't any posters identifying coping strategies. And she said, very honest to me, she said, so I'm probably going to have to pull from my own money to get like some posters or something because they put it on the curriculum, but they didn't really give a class or anything about it. And I said, I got you, right? We did introduce this. I am a certified positive discipline educator, both in the classroom, at home, and in early childhood education centers. I focus specifically on families who have neurodivergent children and families of color, mostly because even though positive discipline, I feel very strongly that positive discipline can be modified to support different cultures, can be modified to support different needs of families and neurodivergent. Yeah. A lot of people struggle with how to do that and the application of it. And so I'm kind of the intercessor. That's where I come in. I make Adler make sense for Black families, Latina families, and I make Adler make sense for neurodivergent families. And so that's what I told her. I was like, I'm happy to make your poster sets for you. I actually created my own poster set, Common Corner poster set. I call it the cool Common Corner poster set that has multiracial children, has coping strategies that include sensory and somatic movement and things, different coping strategies that children who are neurodivergent may need as opposed to just breathing and counting. I told her I was happy to help her with her Common Corner. I told her I was actually happy to come and bring some of my coping strategies. I have some of those somatic things. So I have tracing models that have different symbols and you can follow them as you breathe, but you're tracing them. So you're still doing some type of somatic movement. You're still getting sensory. Mm-hmm. I also have a small like drum, but it's a sound drum that makes different sounds as you hit different parts. So again, you're getting that somatic movement. You're also getting sensory of sound. I have a cushion that the child can sit on. It kind of gives them the ability to sit, but still move and have that mobility, so that they can maybe rock to calm down. So I wanted to bring some of those things and I brought them so she would have more in her Common Corner. I also, because I do this for all of my teachers, I have a cheat code. I am a certified positive discipline educator. I always offer my children's teachers the opportunity to learn for free. I will teach you and I will give you the link if you get interested in being certified yourself. So I always offer that for my teachers because they're a part of my village. For me, a part of positive discipline, a part of Adler, a part of understanding the need for belonging and significance and respect is understanding that neurodivergent children need to feel like they belong and are significant in your household, yes, but also in their school, in their areas where they're doing extracurricular activities, with your family outside of your home. And in order for that to happen, you have to treat all those people in those different areas as your community. They have to learn and understand your child's autism and how to support them as you do.
If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to follow. And also, if you want more information, visit the website, yogipatel.com.